Woody Johnson is an abysmal NFL owner. If you're a fan of the New York Jets, there's a good chance you agree with that statement. But even if you know it's true, you may have a difficult time articulating exactly what the problems are with the way Woody Johnson runs this team. Well, that's what I'm here for. I'm going to explain to you the ways Woody Johnson holds this team back today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from ganggreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day. A big shout out to everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday, and our episode today is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Well, if you're a Jets fan like me, you're probably really upset with the way this team's performing. And more than anything, you're upset with this team's owner because what you are seeing on the field is part of the owner's master plan. This is the man who hatched this plan to put this team together as it was constructed. And you can see that it is completely failing, as this team has failed through much of Woody Johnson's tenure. And I am done being nice. I am just completely fed up with the way Woody Johnson runs this team. If you've listened to my podcast, I've tried to keep things on the lighter side through the years when I've discussed Woody Johnson. I'll always make jokes when he says something kind of silly, but no more. This team is 2-5 right now. This team is facing enormous challenges in the future because of decisions that Woody Johnson has made, and he's been front and center. If you doubt this is Woody Johnson's team, you should see the last 2 weeks where he's the guy making it clear I'm making all the decisions. Well, the decisions are not good decisions. And the Jets are in a very difficult spot because of a lot of things the owner has done. And I speak with a lot of Jets fans, and there's a lot of frustration in this fan base. And I hear a lot of the same things over and over. One of the things I hear is that we've tried things every way possible. It just doesn't work. Another is we're cursed. And I'm not here to tell you that the Jets have been immune from bad luck. Of course, last year when Aaron Rodgers goes down 4 plays into the season, that's really bad luck. That clearly impacted their season. The Jets have had bad luck at other points in the past, especially during this 13-year playoff drought. But bad luck alone does not explain it. And a lot of it goes back to the way this team is run. And a lot of the way this team is run under Woody Johnson is just wrong. It's the antithesis of what good teams do. And when people say the Jets have tried things every way possible, that statement I don't agree with, because you think about the way the great franchises are run in this league. You think about the way the top teams operate. What do? Most of their team building is not sexy. A lot of it is stuff that kind of flies under the radar, and you don't notice it until the team actually starts succeeding. It's not the flashy moves. It's not the high-flying trades. It's not the big-time signings that generate all the buzz on NFL Network and ESPN during the offseason. What do the good teams do? They value draft picks. They stockpile draft picks, especially in those rounds 3 to 5, because that's where some of the best players are found. That's where some of the best value picks are found. They figure out ways to develop talent. They're obsessed with developing young players because cost-controlled young talent is the lifeblood of any quality NFL team. They obsess with finding any little advantage they can find. Whether it's the way they manage their salary cap, whether it's using analytics to develop better in-game strategies, or player nutrition, or training habits, or better ways to evaluate players. The best teams are obsessed with finding these little advantages, finding quality people to train players. These are the things that the best teams are obsessed with. Do any of those describe the New York Jets over the last 15 years? The answer is no. When's the last time the Jets ever tried to build their team using those principles? Really, in Woody Johnson's tenure, I can only name a 2-year stretch, and it was 2021 to 2022. And that was a stretch where it felt like the Jets were actually making progress because they had that great draft class with Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, and Breece Hall, and Jermaine Johnson. And they had some misses, of course. I mean, Zach Wilson was a really bad miss. Mekhi Becton was a really bad miss, of course, impacted by injury to an extent. That goes back to luck. But it felt like the Jets were actually making progress. And then Woody stepped in and decided, we're not doing this anymore. We're doing things my way. And that's how we got to the point we're at right now. a very frustrating thing. You know, you can look at the great teams in this league, and you can point to the players that they have. You know, Kansas City, the team that's won the 3 Super Bowls in the last 5 years. They have the best quarterback in the league, Patrick Mahomes, guy who's going to be a living legend. But Mahomes did not fall out of the sky. Mahomes was good scouting. And Mahomes was a bit of a project when the Chiefs traded up for him. One other thing, the Chiefs were a good team before they had Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs had won the division title the year before they drafted Mahomes. And then they sat Mahomes and they let Mahomes develop. And people, it's easy to forget this because the guy's going to go down as an all-time great, but he had some stuff to work on. And I know this is a provocative statement. He goes to another team. I'm not sure he develops the same way. He goes to a team that doesn't have the same coaching staff or the same offensive talent. He was a bit raw. He went to the team with the best offensive coach of the generation, Andy Reid. Team loaded with offensive talent. The thing in the NFL is that rosters are 53 players. You have 22 starters. You have a bunch of role players beyond that. You have these huge coaching staffs, these huge front office, huge training staffs, huge administrative staffs. One person can make a difference, especially at the quarterback position, but it's not all one person. You're never one person doesn't fix all of your problems in the NFL. It's not true of Kansas City. It's not true of Baltimore. It's not true of the New York Jets. Woody Johnson tries to sell hope. And as fans, we always try to be hopeful. You know, if your team gives you any plausible way that a move's going to work out, of course you're going to be excited. You know, the Jets make a big signing. Of course you're going to be excited. Woody Johnson, that's all he does. All he does is try and sell hope. You know, the Jets, and that's been especially true recently, especially the last 2 years, but in particular the last 2 weeks. Because what's happened? The Jets fired their head coach. That was supposed to fix everything. You know, this team that has all these issues on both sides of the ball. Let's get rid of the head coach. Let's promote a first-time head coach into a very chaotic situation. That's going to fix everything. And then last week, they trade for Davante Adams, not valuing the draft pick, acting like a 31-year-old receiver is going to come in and fix all their problems. Again, Jets had bigger problems than wide receiver when they made that trade. But it's a way for Woody Johnson to sell hope. You know, we're one move away. It doesn't work that way in the NFL. It just doesn't. And but it's easier to sell that than it is to actually build a quality culture. It's all about winning the narrative for the New York Jets. It's not about building a team to last. Everything in the big moves with Woody Johnson are frequently gimmicks. Why do I say that? Well, look at the way the head coaching situation was handled. At the end of last season, Robert Saleh, you can read what Woody Johnson said. You can listen to what he said. Robert Saleh was the right coach for this team. It was all Zach Wilson's fault. Remember when Woody Johnson said the problem with the Jets last year was we didn't have a quarterback? He essentially said it was all Zach Wilson's fault. We had a good coach. We just didn't have a quarterback. 5 games later, that changed. Let me ask you this. You watched the Jets last year. You watched the Jets this year. In those first 5 games, was anything Robert Saleh did in those first 5 games that wasn't evident the first 3 years he coached the team? No. Woody Johnson just needed a new scapegoat. And let me ask you another question. And I think this is important. Before you make this change, now we can argue the merits of whether the Jets should have fired Robert Saleh. I think the job performance justified it. I'm not crying for Robert Saleh. But when you make this change, shouldn't you consider how it impacts your defense? Because really the way the Jets defense has been run, we don't know exactly what Robert Saleh's responsibilities were for the defense. We don't know how hands-on he was. But really I see one of 2 possibilities for the way the Jets defense was run. Either Robert Saleh was really hands-on or Jeff Ulbrich was running the defense. Well, if Robert Saleh was really hands-on and you fire him, what do you think the impact's going to be on the defense? Or if Saleh was hands-off and Ulbrich was running everything, well, he's your new interim head coach. Now he's going to have all these new responsibilities. He's probably going to be pulled for the defense. How are you going to adjust to that? Do you think Woody Johnson considered any of that for even a second? And even if you think Robert Saleh deserved to be fired, and I do, don't you think that that's something you really need to consider before you make this move? Well, there's no indication Woody Johnson considered it because every single report that's come out has said that he didn't really talk with anybody about this. He just decided he was going to make a move because it was a quick fix. It was something he could sell to the fan base. It was something something the fans on Twitter would love. Again, he's selling hope. He doesn't care about building a culture. And I know a lot of this is very vague. I know a lot of this is open to interpretation. A lot of it's subjective. That's why it's tough to win in the NFL because these things are not easy to build, but you can't build them unless you try. Ahead on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about some other problems with Woody Johnson because I'm just getting started. I am fed up with this guy. I know you are too. And I'm trying to explain to you. I know that there are problems here, but I'm trying to articulate exactly what the problems are. And one of them is that he just can't get out of the way of people. He won't let people do their jobs. And we'll go into some examples of that as we continue here on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. It's a very frustrating time to be a New York Jets fan. We're not talking about a happy topic today, so let me give you some good news. Jets are on the road this weekend against the New England Patriots, one of the worst teams in the NFL. As bad as the Jets are going right now, this Patriots team might be the worst in the league. And the Jets have already handled them once this year. Jets, despite their 4-game losing streak, are 6.5-point favorites at the moment on FanDuel. So FanDuel's the place to go to get in on the action and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just visit fanduel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Again, that's FanDuel, FanDuel.com. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is also brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just a jobs board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who are not actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. If it was up to me, I'd place a job ad for new owner for the Jets because I think we need one. I'm telling you today, I'm not very happy with Woody Johnson, and I'm sure you feel the same way. Well, I can't do that, but your small business might be able to use LinkedIn for some help. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, it may not have the time or resources to hire. And LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. A big shout out to you every day. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Unfortunately, our topic today is the owner, Woody Johnson. And as much as I've tried to put humorous spins on Woody Johnson's various statements to the press in recent years, this has reached a breaking point, I think, for me and for a lot of other fans, because this team that he has been the driving force between putting together, he's been Mr. All In, is crashing at the moment. This team is 2-5. This team looks lifeless. It's very difficult to see this team coming out of this mess. And the owner has to start taking blame. The owner has been quick to point fingers at everyone else. 2 weeks ago today, he claimed Robert Saleh was the problem. He said something to the effect of using the old cliche, you can't keep doing the same things and expecting different results. Well, that didn't work too well. The Jets lost to Buffalo. So what was the new fix? We're going to get a new receiver. The issue was Mike Williams ran the bad route. Our receivers don't have chemistry with Rodgers. Now we've got Davante Adams. So we're going to trade for Davante Adams. That's going to fix everything. Well, after another dismal offensive performance where Davante Adams caught 3 passes for 30 yards, maybe that's not the solution. Maybe the issue is that the Jets just don't know how to build a winner. And maybe that's because the owner doesn't understand what it takes to win in the NFL, because the owner is always looking for the quick fix and the owner's always meddling. And you can go back to Brett Favre in 2008 when he forced Brett Favre, and we know this because the coach didn't want him. He forced Brett Favre on Eric Mangini. How about in 2012? Forced Tim Tebow on the Jets. I mean, I think we all know Woody was the driving force behind Tebow. How about 2013 when he is looking to hire a new general manager, forces the new general manager to get Rex Ryan? We always talk about results. We always talk about how bad John Idzik was. Do we ever consider the reasons John Idzik ended up being the guy they hired? It was because Woody scared off any potential GM with any credibility. Anybody who was qualified for the job wouldn't take it because he wasn't interested, because Woody meddled and forced the team to keep Rex Ryan and forced the new GM manager to go into it, take a job without having his own coach. At the same time, he was dictating that the team needed to trade Darrelle Revis. So you take this job, you have to keep a coach you don't want, and you have to trade the best player on the team. And we can go back to this Aaron Rodgers situation. Again, there's nothing wrong necessarily with trading for Aaron Rodgers last year, but there's something wrong when you act like Aaron Rodgers is going to fix all of your problems. When you just say, well, if we get Aaron Rodgers, it doesn't matter. We can sign Alan Lazard. I shouldn't pick on Lazard because Lazard's actually having a good year this year, but you saw him last year. We can sign Randall Cobb. It's no big deal. We'll just make him a starting receiver. We'll bring in Nathaniel Hackett. It won't matter. Rodgers is fine. Again, this is all about what he's all about trying to sell hope. He's trying to sell the quick fix. He's trying to tell you that you're one move away, that we don't need to build anything here. And it just doesn't work that way. And one of the problems is that Woody just won't delegate. Woody will not hire people and let them run the team. And I just named you all the instances where he meddled. Well, part of the problem is, again, that Woody just won't hand over control to anybody. He's always got to have these competing power structures. Again, in the NFL, you need to build a culture. You need to have everybody pushing in the same direction, everybody on the same page. Your coaching staff and your general manager need to be on the same page, because the coaching staff needs to be able to articulate what sort of players we need. The coaching staff needs to be able to tell the front office, these are the guys we want. These are the guys we need. These are the attributes we're looking for, and trust that the front office is going to get those guys. And the front office needs to trust that when they get those get guys with those attributes, the coaching staff knows how to develop them. There has to be trust between the coaching staff and the front office. Well, what's happened with the Jets in Woody Johnson's tenure, especially the second half of his tenure? Well, we could start with Rex Ryan and John Idzik, where the team was not. You had a general manager who was focused on the long run, general manager who thought he had plenty of time to build the team, and a head coach who needed to win to keep his job. So you had distrust between these two guys. They didn't work well together, and the team was bad as a result. So you get rid of them, and then Todd Bowles and Mike Maccagnan come in, and those two had such a good relationship that Todd Bowles had no idea the Jets made a trade deadline deal for Rashard Robinson. The two of them all the reports that came out just said the two of them didn't really talk at all. They didn't really have any sort of relationship. And then you make that change. You get rid of Todd Bowles. You bring in Adam Gase, which is a horrible hire. He works with Mike Maccagnan so well that Maccagnan gets fired a few months before the team even plays another game. So you don't have the key decision makers on the same page on your team. Nobody's working together, and you wonder why you don't get results. And part of the reason that this atmosphere exists is that Woody Johnson has no idea what to look for in hires. He has no idea how to build a winning organization. I mean, let's think about the hires that this team has made under Woody Johnson's tenure. The John Idzik hire was made when Woody had to seek out an outside headhunter. What does that tell you? It tells you that Woody Johnson has no idea what attributes a good general manager has. He had to go hire a search firm to run his general manager search, and they ended up again with John Idzik. So it shows you that Woody Johnson just has no idea the types of people he needs to put in charge of his team to win. How that doesn't work. So what does he do? He goes out and gets Ron Wolf and Charlie Casserly, two executives with distinguished records, no question about it. But what do those guys do? Well, they end up leading you to Mike Maccagnan. And why did they lead you to Mike Maccagnan? Well, because Maccagnan was a Casserly protege, and Casserly took the job that Woody gave him, essentially used it as an opportunity to put one of his guys in to help out one of his friends, get one of his friends a general manager job. Mike Maccagnan was at a level as the director of college scouting in Houston that's kind of below where a typical general manager would be. You usually don't make a jump that big from director of college scouting to general manager. And in these instances, both cases, Woody hired people who were totally unqualified to be general managers. And he hired people who did not work well with the coaching staffs. And you wonder why the Jets end up in the situation they're in. You wonder why the Jets can't put together a cohesive roster. You wonder why they have this atmosphere where they're always looking for the quick fix. They keep bringing these general managers in and claiming that this guy's the next genius who's going to turn our team around. Well, it doesn't work. And these general managers end up being in over their heads. They draft these quarterbacks, and they have no plan to nurture these quarterbacks. They don't bring in good coaching. They don't build an offensive line around them. They don't bring in good receivers, and these quarterbacks fail. And then how many of these we're now on our second quarterback who's going somewhere else and having success. Geno Smith had success in Seattle. It turned into a quality starter in Seattle. Now Sam Darnold looks like he's on the verge of doing the same thing in Minnesota. And, you can look back on this stuff and say, how does this happen? Why do we have such bad luck? Well, bad luck because you create an atmosphere that does not nurture growth. You don't bring in good people to run your team. These people do not build a culture, And these guys fail. And of course, these guys have talent, so they go somewhere else and have success. It all goes back to ownership. It all goes back to ownership. And I hear some defenses of Woody Johnson. Ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to go through defense by defense of Woody Johnson, and we're going to talk about why none of those defenses hold up. That's ahead here on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Jets podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the best place to go to get tickets, and Game Time now has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I've used Game Time myself. I've used it for tennis. I've used it to go see some theater shows. I've used it to go to a college football game. It works every time. It's been a couple hours before my event. I pulled out my phone. I can't believe the deals I've gotten. And I'll tell you my favorite part of Game Time. They show you the view from your seat before you buy. So you don't show up at your venue and get surprised by an obstructed view. You know exactly what it's going to look like when you arrive. And it's all thanks to Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKDOWNNFL, one word with no space, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Tuesday. I wish I had a different topic for you today, but I think we really need to address the owner right now because the Jets are, at this point of the season, an enormous disappointment. And I think so much of the blame has to go to Woody Johnson. And he has done a horrible job, not just this year, but through most of his Jets tenure. Now, there are still people who defend Woody Johnson, believe it or not. So I want to go through some of the arguments in Woody Johnson's favor that I hear the most and explain to you why they just don't hold up. The first one I hear is that, he's willing to spend to the cap every single year. Now, I will say this. There is this idea out there that Woody Johnson is cheap. That is not fair. So I think if you want to say he's willing to spend to the cap every year, okay, fair enough. I agree that it is an unfair criticism to say Woody Johnson's cheap. That said, this is an NFL team. Owning an NFL team is essentially licensed to print money. Show me an NFL team that spends greatly below the cap every single year. There is none. That's no great virtue to spend to the cap every single year. Yeah, would he invest in some things to move the team forward? But at the end of the day, I mean, look, that's what you expect out of an NFL owner. Not doing it is an issue. Doing it is what's expected. So I don't want to. You just can't give him credit for that. Next thing I hear is, well, he wants to win. Well, every owner wants to win. David Tepper in Carolina, who might be a worse owner than Woody, wants to win. Jimmy Haslam in Cleveland wants to win. Wanting to win is not enough. All 32 owners want to win. It's how you produce. Next defense I hear is, well, David Tepper's worse. Okay, great. So was he number 31 out of 32? Is Jimmy Haslam worse? What's he, number 30 out of 32? Is that some great prize? I mean, the fact that it could be worse. I mean, that's a really tough argument for me to buy into. It's not good enough. I'm sorry. The objective should not be to avoid being the worst. The objective should be to be a really good owner. One that I hear a lot is, well, this is a corollary to he spends a lot. He always spends a lot. He wants to win. It's corollary to he wants to win one. You must dislike him because of his politics. Now, if you follow things, Woody Johnson's very involved in politics. That's a completely nonsensical point. I mean, that's one that I don't even want to dignify with an answer. The idea that people who agree with Woody Johnson has a 100% approval rating as Jets owner with people who agree to his politics, that's just not true. I mean, I'm sure people who agree with Woody Johnson's politics who dislike the job he's doing as an owner. That's not a valid point. He's a bad owner. He just doesn't do the job. Next one, he tries his best. He just hires the wrong people. That's not a defense of Woody Johnson. That's part of the problem is that he doesn't hire the right people. It goes back to what we were talking about. He doesn't know what to look for in a general manager. He doesn't know what to look for in a head coach. He doesn't know the people you need to hire to build the culture it takes to win. That's not a defense of him. That's the problem with him. That's the reason the Jets have come upon such tough times because he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know what it takes to win in the NFL. He doesn't know the traits that the winners in this league have. That's just, you can't put that on him. The corollary to that is, well, you know what? He hires people that just don't do their job well. Well, it's just, first of all, his role is to hire them. Second of all, look, since 2011, we have changed players. We have changed coaches plenty of times. We have changed general managers plenty of times. We've changed everything on this team. There's only one constant. It's ownership. And when you're this bad for this long, again, there's bad luck that's involved, but there's also a lot of mismanagement. You can't be this bad this long just based on luck. There's a lot of mismanagement. And the only thing that's been consistent in the management is the ownership. And another excuse I hear for him, well, his brother, well, he wasn't here for 4 of those years because he was the ambassador to the UK. Well, who was in charge? It was his brother. He put his brother in charge, his brother who was completely unqualified. And his brother made a mess of things. His brother was the guy who hired Adam Gase. His brother was the guy who declared Mike McCagnon was a great general manager and then let him spend a record amount in free agency and then fired him because he realized that McCagnon wasn't that good after he spent all that money and essentially tied all the Jets cap space up for 2 years. He realized McCagnon wasn't that good. His brother was totally unqualified to run a team. His brother was his brother, though. So it's still the Johnsons running the team. And I'm sure Woody was kept apprised of the situation. I'm sure Woody was kept apprised of the decisions the Jets were making. I'd imagine he had something to say about it. It doesn't excuse him because he hired his brother. And it just goes to show that, the decisions you make, the most important decisions you make as the owner are the people you hire. And the second most important decisions you make are the times you decide to interject yourself into the franchise. This is a guy with no feel for it. And it's frustrating because I don't see where this changes. I have to be honest with you. Like I love the Jets. I've been rooting for this franchise for over 3 decades. And I just feel like I'm waiting for him to sell the team right now. I'm just hoping he sells the team because I've been hoping for a while that, he would eventually smarten up and figure out that he's doing things wrong. But he seems just as emboldened as he ever has been. I don't know if you caught a comment that he made last week. He had a lot to say last week, but he made a comment. He was asked if the season was still salvageable. His answer was salvageable. We're going to kick. You can fill the word in. That level of bravado when you're 2-4, when you've missed the playoffs 13 straight years, and you're talking like you know how to put a winning team together. How about a little humility? How about understanding that your fans are skeptical? When you go out and talk like that, it just makes it sound like you're totally out of touch with reality. And unfortunately, he is. And I hope something changes with this team. Maybe at some point, all the missteps, all the embarrassment, all the losing causes him to take stock of what he's doing. And maybe then we get some change. But I have to tell you, I am so fed up with this ownership right now. I'm sure you are as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. But that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, please give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Tuesday, everybody, and send in your mailbag questions. Tomorrow we'll do our weekly mailbag. Can't wait to answer your questions then. Talk to you Wednesday.